If I were to say to you, what's your strongest memory or biggest impression, or if I just said Berry College to you, what comes to mind?
Change. Miami changed. Berry changed. The student body changed. The faculty, of course, changed. And all of the changes I experienced at the departmental level were, I think I was the only the only nun, very nun, in the department at the time I came there. I had been educated to do college teaching, and that's where I have been. Now, this developed into a faculty that was largely a lay faculty except for administrators. And during my time there, lay administrators were hired.
You mentioned the change. Was it good change, bad change, or both?
It was appropriate change, you'd have to say, with the changes of South Florida, and keeping in mind that Mother Gerald was a very strong woman, but very much associated with her brother, who was Bishop of St. Augustine, and William Mary, who was pastor of Miami Beach Parish, and had connections, therefore, with the clergy of the peninsula, I guess you'd say.
Describe some of the changes. I'm sure it was across the board. The women changed, the student body changed, but I mean, describe some of the changes that you recall. And when you got there, it was all women, Catholic university, and I assume all white women.
And women that we thought of as girls.
Of course.
You know, it was allowed. I tried to cure myself of the habit, that's another word, the custom of thinking of them as girls. But from the way we monitored them and guided them and so forth. But as Berry developed, of course, faculty diversified, and they had to come to us with credentials. The sisters, for the most part, were in the course of completing professional credentials. So I was working with people, sisters from the congregation in my department, not throughout the school, but in my department, who could not be said to have completed their professional education. And so they either completed doctorates, for instance, in a different field or in a different place. And it was my responsibility to find lay faculty who could flourish in the kind of situation that we had, which meant a service department in the sense that all of these diversified developments, all is probably too general a word, but many of those developments, particularly in the biological medical areas, which were areas of opportunity, you know.
I suspect you must have stood out, though, as a nun with a PhD in chemistry at the beginning of all of this. You're pretty singular, I would suspect.
I'm singular only in the sense that chemistry was not the choice. It was my choice. The first time I registered at Siena, when everybody was registering for the biology course, I asked if I could take chemistry. That is the beginning and end of my story. So I continued right along then to the PhD right away and went into this situation at Siena, which was a really good place to develop, because in your history of the place you probably have heard of M squared, known as yes, Mary Michael.
Oh,
And that was the secret code for Miriam, who pushed me into joining her in research right away as part of the development of a professional scientist, you know. And so I worked with her.
when you went to college, you went to college to go to college, was your intention at the time to become a nun?
Oh, well, I was already a nun when I entered.
Oh, okay.
I entered from a high school where the Adrian Dominicans were the teacher. I entered the convent, all right? I would probably say at that time I had a vocation. And from the very beginning, the first summer that I was there as postulant, we were immediately enrolled in Siena Heights. And that's when I said the magic word, chemistry. And therefore, I didn't know at the time that we were undertaking a second college in addition to Siena, but I continued immediately to complete a bachelor's and go on for graduate work.
How did Barry embrace the change? Obviously, at that time, much was going on. There was the civil rights movement. Eventually, there would be the women. Was it
very good question?
There was no one saying, no, I want an all-women's Catholic university, or I don't want black students here, or,
Many of our students came to us from parishes where the Barry family was well known. Pastors were under Bishop Barry, and they came to Barry as a girls' Catholic boarding school. Right? But the needs of the area changed so quickly at that time. If you, for instance, I came in 58. You remember the Bay of Pigs. You remember the upset in Cuba, and the way Barry responded to this with, first of all, promoting the fluency in English of the professional doctors, lawyers, who were the first to escape, you might say, into South Florida. And then, but at the same time, their wives worked at anything. Beautiful women who had never lifted a dust cloth, you know. But a big advantage was that at that time, Barry employees automatically were given college scholarships for all their children. So many of those women stayed with us years. And
what was the reaction? I'm sorry. I was going to say, what was the reaction to, so they opened the doors with the Cubans fleeing Castro's regime and taught them English, which was critical for them to
yes,
become a lawyer in this country or a doctor or whatever. Their wives found themselves out of sorts. What about when the college became coeducational? I know they started with men in the summer, but what was the reaction when the decision was made that, I'm sure partly for financial reasons as well, but what was the reaction then when it decided to go co-ed?
I have to say that from the very first, I had men in the students, not as many, but part-timers from the University of Miami. I have an idea that they thought that it might be easier to take their basic physics here. They never disappointed, but they did well. Anyhow, and also the fact that coming up from Cuba were the Augustinians who ran a colegio down there and opened what at that time was called Biscayne College. And we had a consortium type of agreement so that Father Van Bush, one of their science teachers, taught a course in our department, and one of our teachers taught remember, I should be not sure she went there. I think the students came to Barry for part of their elementary chemistry course, but there was a close relationship with that.
But there weren't strong Catholic fathers saying, wait a minute, I want my daughter to go to an all-women's...
I never was conscious of that. Going back to the Biscayne College thing, they didn't introduce the upper level chemistry courses for a couple of years. And so we very shortly had in our department then the male students from the colegio, or from Biscayne, which at that point was an all-men's college.
Okay. What about when the school became integrated? Sister Nadine has mentioned the first African-American girl being there, but obviously the school has certainly diversified a lot since then.
But we kind of, in our department anyway, we kind of eased our way into that by the fact that we had Caribbean students. I remember a young woman from Jamaica who knew that she would have to get a job quickly after graduation. And we had to convince her family that Barry was a good place for her. And sure enough, she just thrived and went, in fact, by the time she had research experience in one of the programs that were open to the MARC students, which is a minority encouragement. She was actually recruited by Merck. but that's just one example. Recruitment, they took her up there, ran her through all their departments, and on graduation, she stepped into a position. In the North, the stigma of interracial, what's the word for it? Attitudes being a factor in employment and so forth.
Well, and also you were in South Florida at a time when Florida was very much a southern state.
Yeah.
So Barry must have been somewhat unique then, because the surrounding there, I am quite sure, was less tolerant than Barry University was.
Florida, South Florida was not a southern state.
Even back then?
Nothing about it was had the prejudice. Let's say, old ladies forget the word.
It is prejudice, though. There was prejudice, though, at that time. I think that's a perfectly fine word.
The inbred. What's the word I want to say?
The insular thinking, perhaps?
Yeah. First of all, there was a close relationship between the Barry, Bishop Barry, and perhaps to a greater extent, or a more evident extent to me, William Barry had close relationships with the South Florida, the Miami Beach area, that was largely Jewish. So that the idea of welcoming, cooperating with, enjoying that diversity, was there at the very beginning of Barry. During Sister Dorothy, I almost said reign, but it's not the right word, during her presidency, which she entered by appointment, really. During that time, I volunteered to be one of the congregation representatives at what was at that time called the Lay Advisory Board, which morphed into a more formal thing. But what did I start out with here?
That it was the Barry embraced the changes.
It embraced the changes, right? And then Sister biology, John, the dynamo in the biology department, came in as a teacher, and we got the Mark Scholarship, which were minority access to research careers. And so our department then had students, largely male students, who were on the road to doctoral degrees, either professional degrees in one of the medical sciences or academic degrees. One young man I thought he wanted to be a psychiatrist, but ended up at Dow Chemical, anyhow, one of the things that was an advantage was our adaptability to what they needed, and honestly, just loving those kids. They really were wonderful. I remember that I had a policy that I didn't give makeup tests there were all sorts of procedures introduced so it never should be possible to give a makeup test, because they were a very great chore to make an objective test. And so they could drop one grade, they could do this to, they could miss one test, they could, and so forth, all this maneuvering. And I would return test papers and habitually say, if you don't like your grade, come and see me. And that led to a relationship that generally they didn't get their grade changed, but I learned what their particular needs were, which we were able to meet. But this required our having a faculty that was equally adaptable. And we were really very fortunate in hiring and then keeping well-qualified faculty even though they were working largely in a service capacity for students who had a need of chemistry or physics. And if they came in with research interests, a couple of cases came in with funding associated with their research interests, we had to provide with really very limited physical facilities for them to continue and develop and be satisfied and to carry over to the students their enthusiasm for science. And I think that it was something notable in the department that the students knew that you wanted, whatever it was they wanted to do, you wanted them to be successful.
It's sort of the gift of teaching, isn't it, in a
Yeah.
way?
And
You may not have every test tube that you want or Bunsen burner there, but you,
well, yeah.
but you can.
We were fortunate in, to branch off into another topic just for a minute, there was emphasis early in the years I was there for developing a truly liberal arts education, which meant that you had courses in various areas, including science, that diversified the college experience. And among these, of course, was a science course. And so
And there still is.
there is. And so we had to devise a course without prerequisites, without interest really for the general student. And fortunately, at that time, I had recruited Sister Barbara Gass, who is on campus here now, for the physics department, because I had been teaching all the physics that was required at that time. And we developed a course that included astronomy, and had somehow acquired a 3-inch refractor that was up on the roof in a very dangerous position, but we didn't have the fear of heights at that time that was introduced, and so forth. But anyhow, I wanted to include laboratory experience. And so when we moved into the new science building, one room was intended adjacent to the physics area, where I could bring in instruments and have this non-scientific group do a couple of quantitative experiments. Lo and behold, a few years later, I discovered that over the weekend, it had been decided that was going to be the gross anatomy lab for the so across from my office for the next 4 years. We never did get that other course, by the way.
You did not.
But getting good faculty and retaining them and allowing them to enjoy development in their own field. And a couple of them came to us as wives who were following their husbands.
You know, sister, it occurs to me, I think you miss teaching, do you?
Oh, I don't know.
You would not want to be teaching now, but you enjoyed teaching when you taught.
Oh, yes, I enjoyed teaching right up until the time I came here. After I retired from Barry, that was 35 years after I started to teach there, I went over to the cathedral parish and volunteered for the elementary school. So I spent my final 15 years still living at Barry, but teaching phonics, arithmetic, and adult English, adult to the children from Haiti who spent their growing years in the care of grandparents who spoke Creole. And so, although they were themselves American-born, in most cases fluent in English, did not develop the adult vocabulary. So all of those things are different kinds of challenges that require a love of teaching.
Do you regret the less influence of the sisters, you know, at the university, or do you think that's a very positive thing? That
I miss that word.
Do you regret that there is less Dominican influence in the sense of the sisters being such a presence? Certainly there was a time when I was told 3/4 of the teachers there were all nuns. Now it's probably not even 1/4 of the fact there.
I think when you look back at the history of the development of the orders, it was a time where there were 10 children in the family, 15 in Catherine of Siena, but that's a special case. That there was some change in the family situation, very often the death of a parent or so forth, so that the child came to our academy. I remember a time after I may still have been teaching at Siena, when we had 100 postulants, 110 novices. I mean, that isn't ever going to happen again. You know. Now, where does this relate to your question? I've forgotten, of course.
No, you're right on track. So then what's the future? Because we won't see those numbers again.
No,
do you think, are the associates going to maybe fill the breach? Or is it okay maybe that a Catholic university is dominated more by lay professionals as opposed?
The needs of the church are increasingly covered by the laity, which it ought to be. And the role of women is developing. I just heard that the Vatican Bank is now headed by a woman, which is gold star for.
This will be a very interesting pope, I think.
Yes, yes. And developing the leadership of women in the church has become an important role for women religious, to turn things over to them so that the more monastic or cloistered aspect of it will still have vocations, but not of that kind or adapted to that. It's a big change in the church.